Hey, hello everyone. Good evening.
Hi, good evening.
Hey, Simon. Yeah, so we can wait others to join. Maybe mostly by 6:10 we can start the program.
Yeah, sure, sure.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. So good evening, everyone. Welcome to the second day of product feature workflow workshop, and we have Arvind here, our chief speaker of today's session. And so I think we can start the session now. The last day, couple of them are actually joined. I can see some familiar names here. Yeah. So over to Arvind.
Hi, people. Good evening. Um, Hope you had a good weekend today and you got a chance to also work on the uh, assignments that we had set out to do yesterday. So before we start, I'd like to just do a quick recap on yesterday's session and leave the floor open to a couple of questions. And then I will be taking, a few other concepts uh, that might be very useful for your product development process and taking a decision on what kind of features that you would like to add to your projects. So with that, let me share my screen. So I think yesterday we set out to discuss about yesterday we were discussing about how do we start the process of identifying the features that we can add into our product and or solution that we are offering, and what are the steps that we kind of take to achieve that, right? So one of the most important things that we before we set out to begin uh, building our products, right? We should first not start with an idea and directly go to build a product. Instead, we said that we should start identifying what's the problem and for whom that we are trying to address, right? So that translates broadly into two things. One is the definition of the problem that we are trying to solve, and the end user or the ultimate beneficiary of the solution, right? These are the two important entities or two important steps that is involved in any kind of solution building process. So for this, we applied the concept of design thinking. And design thinking broadly, as we had discussed, entails empathy. Empathy is the process where we try and get into the shoes of our end users and customers and understand the problem and its solution from their perspective. And this is essentially done by actually reaching out to customers, reaching out to the people who are facing the problem and understand, empathize, as well as ideate around the situation that they are in, and not necessarily from the point of developing a solution, but necessarily from a point of giving them opportunity to give you inputs, right? So once that is done, then we go out and define the problem specifically uh, with the end user in mind. And what I mean by definition is not the solution. Definition is a combination of two things. One is the how the problem is being resolved, right? So what we call for that is what we call as value proposition, right? So once you have identified the end user, identified the problem and the specific value proposition that you're going to address, only then we start ideating, right? We start ideating on the different ways through which the problem can be solved effectively. We are not going to ideate on different ways how the product is going to be built, uh, how the product is going to be built, or what feature the product will have is a end result, right? It is the end result of the process of design thinking, of empathy, and then definition, and the ideation process. And during the stage where we shift from ideation to prototyping, that's when the actual solutions and features start to come out. So please remember that don't start with the features of the product first. Start with the end user, start with the biggest problem that you can address through your solution, and what is the most effective way of doing that. Once that is complete, then we go out and build the product, prototype, test, get feedback, and then the loop continues. This is the structure of design thinking that we discussed yesterday. And through this process, we start identifying what we call as features. But before the features, what translates or what transpires first is the benefits. So, and we had discussed in detail about what do we mean by a benefit through slides like this. Benefits are the value that the user gain from using the functionality of our product or solution, right? So first we identify the value that the end user is gaining. And here we have to ensure that the value is gained through very specific set of functionalities. And those specific set of functionalities are called as features, right? And so even if it's a single value proposition, like yesterday we discussed about a travel portal, or we were discussing about fuel cells and so many other projects that we were discussing. A travel portal is a value proposition for experiences and for memories and all of that. But those, as we realized yesterday, is not enough to actually set out and build a product, right? What is important is that particular value has to be broken down further and further and further into much more specific functionalities. And these specific functionalities is what leads you into defining features. And then we start working towards these features. When I say working towards these features, is when the actual ideation and product development or solution development process starts, right? So that is essentially determined by a few simple logical steps. If we identify a particular functionality as very important to solve the problem, then we also parallelly at the same time ask a question of, do we as a team or do we as a solution provider have the necessary capability, have the necessary resources to actually make this particular solution viable or a particular solution available for the end user. And that is what we define as complexity. So complexity essentially entails about 2 to 3 parameters. One of the biggest parameters as students, as developers, is that we need to understand what kind of competency and capability do we as a team already have to execute it. And if that complexity can be achieved through our capability, then we say that it is easy for us to do, right? And then the couple of other parameters that will pitch in is the, do we have enough time to do that, or how much time will it take to achieve that solution? And obviously the other resource that we have to also consider is money, right? How much of capital is available with us? All of these kind of, in very simple terms, become what we call as available resources. So only if we have the necessary resources to do a particular, to build a particular solution, only then we can set out to do it. Otherwise, it will be futile because we'll be investing too much time, effort, and money to build a solution, and maybe the project will not be able to see the day of light or light of day, right? So that's the point. So now yesterday we kind of put out a small little Excel based on these 3, 4 parameters that we spoke about. First and foremost, as we said, when we do the empathy process, we identify the end user, which comes on the left side of the column called as a persona or a problem that we are trying to solve. And this persona essentially can be a single person, but generally it's going to be a set of like people, right? Similar people or similar, what you call as traits of people are put together as one persona. In our case, we were working with a traveler. And then, even though it's a single traveler, we went out and said that that's a persona. And then we also said a travel group as another persona, right? Or another set of end users, primarily because a single traveler does not have certain features or does not need certain features, whereas a group of travelers traveling together need certain additional features into our product. So we have kind of demarcated, though the target customer or the target audience is the same, we have kind of demarcated it, right? And what we kind of did not do yesterday is we should have gone out and built it further by identifying a completely different set of persona, which is probably very critical for this project to scale, right? So what I mean by that, I'll just probably show that to you so that you understand what I mean. Yesterday we were talking about these product features. So the other persona or a thing would be maybe a travel agency, right? So essentially, this app can be marketed into the ecosystem once these basic features are built. Can be if we can add value to a travel agency, right? Or maybe a hotel front desk, right? What we call as what is it called? Uh, Coincides, right? What I can't even pronounce that word, but yeah. So if you have a travel agency or a tour planner at the hotel or something like these kind of will form a similar persona. Let me call it as an agency. So what happens here is if somebody goes through an agency, like for example, you can call a Cox and Kings or a Thomas Cook or these aggregators of various travel experiences, right? Uh, so what they will do is when they provide you an itinerary, say you book a package tour, right? And they say that if you're going as a group, for instance, say let me take a simple example. You want to take a trip to the Himalayas and on a biking trip. So there are 30 of you who are planning to do this, right? So this travel agency can provide you with this app as a feature of the travel itself. So each one of you will be made to download this app, and then the whole other ecosystems will remain the same. What benefit the travel agency gets is maybe one of the biggest benefit and value proposition is maybe you can say they can add geofencing. So geofencing would give safety to their customers, right? At the same time, the travel agency will obviously benefit financially or commercially from that if we start making this product uh, financially viable for us as developers. Then maybe certain revenue can be shared to them also. But at the same time, this makes the travel agency feel more premium, right? Their offer will become more premium because it's not only providing an opportunity of geofencing, but along with that, the opportunity of collaboration will be there. The opportunity of creating maps and route maps and itinerary planning and experiences, all of these that we spoke of can start coming under the setup. So this here, the persona or the end user is completely different, right? However, it is a additional feature that we start adding into the system. So each of these, geofencing will then make the travel agent have a login, a specific user flow, and they will set the boundaries. So what will be need is uh, map boundaries. So if somebody goes out of that boundary, then there will be a notification, and then maybe also a call facility or some kind of tracking facility and all of that, right? So then there could be also a breakdown call, right? Breakdown call. So what do you mean by a breakdown call? Is somebody's bike or vehicle is broken down, and then they can press a SOS button, and then the travel agency can kick in and provide the service, right? So this feature can also be provided to people who are not part of the travel agency also, right? Somebody on that road has a broken bike and the travel agency is taking their group of people on that road. But if they are all on this app, then a SOS service can be created, and these people can go and charge money for people outside of their group, but also provide the service. So additional revenue will be provided. And people with the app, here our end users will find a big benefit of this as an added feature of the product. As you can see, these might not be very high at this point, but as once this set is completed, once this set is completed, it automatically becomes priority, and you can set out to go and build the product, right? So this is something that we were working towards yesterday, and I wanted to add one more end user yesterday, but I kind of missed out because I wanted to bring in a new end user, which is who's not necessarily a traveler, but the presence of this end user in the ecosystem would enhance the primary problem solving capability. The experience of the traveler will be much higher, right? So this is how we go out and identify the product features, priority, and then the complexity. Maybe the complexity is also, if you have built the other things, then the complexity will kind of go on to become medium going forward, right? It's not going to be very difficult because we have already built the same systems. It's just that we create a separate user flow. So that's what we are going to step into today, right? So I think with that, I'll just end my slide with this point. So user story. So what we kind of created now was a user story is a way to define how features might meet customer needs. User story maps are a visual representation of the customer's journey. So we haven't yet done that. So we are now going to go and kind of establish this into our product feature story. And what is the objective of this kind of exercise is which customer segment is served by this feature, which we have already kind of done in the previous slide, right? So we had a traveler group, and we also now had added another group here. So there, the feature was already mapped out. So we've kind of achieved that. Now going forward, we'll also go and see what is the purpose of this feature, which is kind of very clearly mentioned here in the feature list, right? Then we go and say, what does the feature help the customer achieve is the same thing. These special additional points might be required as and when we refine the product further, where whether there's a button needed, whether there's an SOS button needed, or whether it's a call button needed, these kind of decisions to be taken, right? That time, what specific challenges does the feature solve, right? Whether it's a call or whether it's a button or it's just a chat is enough or something like that. What is a desired user experience? This is very important when you do the UX design, which is a much later stage. But when you're writing it, if you can already kind of pinpoint it, you should note it down so that when you are building it, these form the inputs. How does the feature enhance or interact with other features? This becomes very, very important, right? For instance, when we talk of collaboration, or geofencing, or we call location mapping. So if somebody is planning an itinerary and the travel agent or the agency has already set a geofence, or there is some restriction, natural restriction, such as that particular road is closed or something like that, then this feature should interact with the other feature of geofencing. When people are planning the itinerary, the geofencing feature should be active in the backend to throw out a pop-up to the user saying you cannot go to that place because that place is closed, right? So if you already are aware of that, then while development phase, you know how to model the your data flow and user flow, right? So this is typically how we would go about designing our products and solution, right? So at this point, I'd like to pause for a bit and allow to take a few important questions regarding to what we have understood over the last day and what we have recapped now. So people, if you have any specific questions at this point, please go ahead and add to it. You can also go out and add some pointers which would help you uh, understand this concept better, right? So yes, anybody has any questions regarding what we've done so until now in terms of the course?
Hello, sir. I wanted to know, like you mentioned, the travel agency persona, right? I wanted to know while beginning the project, how important it is to identify that specific persona.
It is you see, it's a yes and a no question. It's not important because that is the reason why if you noticed also on my slide, I added it today, right? It was not part of the discussion yesterday at all. First of all, so this today could be 2 months down the line or 3 months down the line for you as you're developing the product. But it's important for you to maintain this what we call as um, sheet, right? A basic visual representation of your product. It's important because you will not know everything right now, right? So it's not that important. But then identifying the ecosystem, right? When we start identifying the ecosystem, because why I brought that up today is I was thinking, how will you position and market this product if whoever is building it, even if it's a hypothetical or a product that does not exist today, for the sake of uh, discussing in this forum, I thought if this product is ready, what is the fastest way of reaching out to customers, end users of the product? The fastest way would be to go and convince a travel agency to be partner with you because you own the product and they can be using it because they are specifically focusing on travelers already, right? So instead of doing digital marketing, instead of doing all of that, where people have no idea about this product, they can still go and join for a travel experience with a travel agency, and the travel agency will recommend the product. So it's kind of important from a marketing and scaling of the product, or even go to market strategy, right? So from that perspective, it becomes very important for you as a developer, but it is not very important from a product standpoint at this point. Do you agree? So it really depends on what stage of the project you are in. But I wanted to bring this up, though I brought it up today, for you people who are building your products, maybe such features and such benefits will be needed after a phase, right? And after you take it to a certain stage, and that is why, if you noticed also, when I put it on the very clearly, when I put it on the on the map, I kind of mentioned that the priority is low, right? It's very clearly mentioned as low because we know that it's not needed right now. But then it will definitely be needed to make the product more, what is the word used, trustworthy, right? More credible, because it's been recommended by the travel agent himself or themselves, and not something that they have downloaded, right? And once you download and you keep the app, then all of these features will be visible to them, so they will definitely travel tomorrow somewhere else, and they realize that the travel agents need is not there, and they can use the app on their own also, right? So that way you have added more users onto your portal. So I hope I answered your question. It's not very important, but it's good to think through all angles and keep the feature priority as low.
Yes, sir, that answered my question.
There's no harm in overthinking the features, right? And putting it down on a sheet. The harm is in saying all the features that you put on the sheet is very high priority, and I will give it all to the. Can you please go on mute, please? I don't know who is that. Yeah. So if in case you have listed down, say, 100 features and 20 customer segments, then you have to be able to identify which one to start with, right? And stick to that, and only then start. Without doing this exercise, what happens is, midway when you're building the product, somebody in your team will say, "Hey, let's do this." And then you will start deviating from your design, the core design. Maybe you've already added some features, coded a set of the programs and all of that. And then suddenly somebody comes in and says, "Okay, let's do this." And you land up adding that halfway through. And then that is what will result in your programs and your solution crashing and not working and all of that. So if somebody comes up with an idea, put it in the sheet, put it as low, have meetings once in a week or once in 15 days, whatever is appropriate for your project, and then move the priority list. Make it medium, then make it high, and then some stage it will become very high. Because suddenly, if there is a regulation by the government on something like on travel restrictions and blah blah blah, then that feature will be very important to add into the into the product, because there's a lockdown, so people just cannot use the app and go anywhere they want. So you need to throw a pop-up saying that I am not allowing, because you will be legally responsible to ensure that people, if they're doing a booking through your app tomorrow, uh, through recommendations that you give, you should be very clearly saying that it's illegal to do it right now because there's a lockdown or whatever, right? So that feature will become high priority because of certain other conditions. Then it's a different matter, right? Until then, you can keep it as low priority. All right. So great. Thanks for the question. Anybody else?
So I had one question. Since I'm like at a very beginning stage of UX designing, I'm just learning. So I've heard many times or a couple of times that as a designer, we should never think you should never think of a problem from the end user's perspective, but always as a designer. So I just wanted your views on this.
Right. You're absolutely right.
Because
So
in this particular segment, we did not have any research, so we did it all by our imagination. Hence the question.
okay. So here it is, right? So this particular workshop or this particular session is for people who are building the product, right? People who are building the product and solution. And it is highly important for them to kind of identify and think through from an end user standpoint. And I kind of also not very sure when you say that when you are thinking from a UX standpoint, don't think about the end user. I do not know if that is fully true. Can you just elaborate on that? Because I'm fully not clear
No,
about
so
the.
I meant like what I meant to say was like if you're a designer, always think as a designer and rely don't assume what the end user want and always rely from the perspective of the end user. For instance, don't make up that this is something that end user might want. Always rely on the input that the end user gets from the interviews or whatever.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So yeah. Okay. Uh, even this exercise that we did here is not something that you throw from your head, right? So this is what you have to have. So that is Prajwal. So let me clarify to everybody actually. So the Excel sheet that we created yesterday is hypothetical, right? That is not how you do it. Even yesterday in the session, I told you to build out a sheet like this, you might need 15 days or 20 days or sometimes even a month or two, right? Before you identify what is the core problem. So I took 5 minutes to talk about empathy, but actually speaking, the process of empathy in design thinking will take about 2 to 3 months, right? Depending on the complexity of the project that you are undertaking, right? So all of these points that I kind of put forth in the workshop yesterday and today are hypothetical scenarios where we are assuming that you get these inputs from the end user, right? So you speak to travelers, you speak to traveling groups, and then they give you these information. But then, certain things are kind of very natural because we also can assume certain features and not build the product, right? So we will go out and showcase certain things to the end users and only then start. Okay, so there's no question. So even when we do business of our products and things, we say, okay, let us sell a particular sanitizer or something, for instance. Like I'm just taking an example. So in that case, I am not going to make 20 flavors of a sanitizer or change the fragrance and all of that. We just pick up something that is available, package it, and then go ask customers, do you think this is good enough? Right? And then if they say yes, only then we get into manufacturing. So we make samples, we make smaller data sets. And that's precisely what even we are doing in this workshop. It's just that because we have the paucity of time here and we can't do design thinking. Otherwise, I had to meet you people after 15 days or after 10 days and ask you what all did you learn from the end user and then design the features. but I've been given a time limitation of 2 hours to convey this concept to you. So obviously, yes, a correction if it was incorrectly communicated is that the features become reality for your product only if your design thinking process and empathy process is done by a very important step called as talking to humans, right? So we in my design thinking sessions, I kind of let me share that to you so that I would like to clarify here very clearly and maybe share this document also. Just hold on for a second, please. Can you see the screen, everybody? Is it visible, people? Is there a talking to humans visible to you on the screen? Yes, no?
Yes, sir.
Yes. So this is a small book by Jif Constable, which I use as a very essence of empathy and design thinking. So this book is called Talking to Humans. Success starts with understanding your customers. So it's very detailed steps. So here we kind of, this is exactly what Prajwal was talking about. If we were our teenagers, have you actually talked to any of them, right? What and should we leave the room, right? This is how the book starts with exactly what Prajwal also said, right? As designers, as product developers, it's not restricted to UI UX designers, it's restricted to everybody. That if we were to target a teenage girl as a product, that's what they're discussing in their boardroom, we need to go out and talk and actually understand from them whether what we're thinking is true or not, right? So some people say, no way. I mean, like, I don't want to do that. I know everything. I'm going to sit and build it here, right? So this is how a typical process starts, and then they go on and go on everything. How an interview should be scheduled, how how to get started with customer discovery. First of all, you don't even know who your customers are. For instance, the app that we were talking about, I kind of came up with the thought that travel agency might be a bigger customer for you than the end traveler, right? So things like that. All of these is a huge process, and this I will share this book with you people on the group, so that you can use that if you're really serious about understanding product feature development and product development itself at a large thing. Does that clarify, Prajwal?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So from that standpoint, it's not necessary that you assume everything, but you can also assume a few things because out of experience we know that it's kind of needed, or that's what we want to give, and then the customer discovery starts to happen because you have developed a feature. For instance, Facebook started out as simple app to rate faces in a college, within a particular college, but then eventually it went out to become uh, a social networking platform. So that's also possible, right? So yeah, anyway, so now any other question, people, or can we move to the next point? Any questions, people? So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to move further and talk about data modeling, right? So for data modeling, when we say we have identified a particular feature, or we have identified a particular user and their journey, right? We are thinking about a travel guy, how and what what they would need in the app, right? So we have to then assume certain, not assume, think through a certain set of process and what are the things that they will encounter in this process, and that forms the first step towards wireframing. So this today's session is more towards wireframing. So what I mean by that is build a data model uh, to identify important actors and entities involved in the process, right? So I'm going to now shift the use case from a travel blog to from a travel portal to Uber, because I'm assuming that everybody is aware of this platform, Uber. It's a ride sharing app for booking rides through, when you don't have your own ride, you can book it and the thing is going to come. And it's very similar to the travel app in terms of so many of its features, like, location mapping and, itinerary planning and all of that could be a similar feature that can be extracted from there to here, right? So now, when we take Uber as an example, is everybody aware of Uber, first of all? Yes.
Yes, sir.
I'm, is there, if somebody doesn't know, then, I can, anyway, when we open up the app, we can discuss that, right? So I'm assuming that all of you know how this works, right? So can somebody tell me what are the most important entities that is involved in Uber app? So I have already identified two personas here. We have a rider, we have a driver. Correct? These two people are extremely important for the app to work in the first place. Now, apart from that, what are the important actors? These two are the important actors. And what other entities are involved in the process of a Uber app functioning? Can somebody go out and say any other thing that might be very important to identify or very important in the app? It could not be, it need not necessarily be an end user, but it could be some data set or certain attribute of a particular thing. So car or the vehicle class. Yes, Ritvik, you're absolutely right. Anything else?
Locations.
Absolutely right. So location is a very critical entity in this process, because the whole program of a whole business model of Uber is dependent on locality and location, right? So yes, so car, vehicle class is very important. Then we have a location. Anything else?
Maybe roads and highway infrastructure.
So that's the, yes, location and then map, right? You're talking
Okay,
about
okay.
photography. Map is extremely important. It's not just location, because location typically is latitude, longitude, but a map is a series of things around that. So route planning and all of that would become very important. So map is an important entity. Anything else?
Payment.
Yes, absolutely right. So there is also a very important thing that this is a business case. So we need to understand how the payment is going to happen. So you have cab, the car somebody mentioned, the trip, that is the map or the thing that we spoke about. The location is very important entity. Apart from that, we have payment, right? So I think we have kind of identified all the. So I'm happy that all of us are following the logical sequence of how do we go about from a feature. Now we have stepped towards actually modeling the product, right? So great. So this is what we call as the important entities, and each of these entities will translate certain attributes or will carry certain attributes with them. So once we start identifying these attributes for each one of them, then we are kind of ready to data model the product. At the same time, build a user flow, right? So here is the data modeling structure. Now, don't get very disheartened by this thing. This is just a something that I picked from the internet. But then, just to give you an idea, when we speak of a rider, what are those parameters of the rider that we require? And why this is important is also when you're talking of a UX design or when you're talking of a UI thing, right? More than UX, the UI, you need to know what attributes are you picking up from the end user or what attributes are you throwing out for them to see, because that's where the interface is between the solution and the end user. So when they particularly log in, you go and say, give me their name. When did they join is something that a backend will pick it up. Then their gender, maybe for safety purposes, and maybe it's needed or not needed. That again is a parameter that you can decide. The country, location, phone number, date of birth, and then most importantly, their payment methods. Because as a rider, you can use the service only if you have the ability to pay. So you as a business will have to keep that as a priority, so you collect the data. Similarly, for the driver, a name, when they join, and then maybe their driver's license. Here, this is a very basic data set. I'm just telling certain things that might be really required to validate before you start, right? Similarly, the car that they drive should be mapped to the user. So here you see the data relation also, right? We said the driver and a cab. So they will be married to each other in our program set. A driver cannot exist without a cab, or a cab cannot exist without a driver, especially in the case of Uber, until unless now Google is coming in and Tesla is coming in with driverless cars, right? Then maybe these two will be separate entities, right? Then the car itself will be a driver, right? So that's a little later stage, but then that's bound to happen in the next 3 to 5 years, at least in certain parts of the world, right? So, but anyway, here we're talking about, but a driver can also have more than one car, right? Today I'm going to drive this, and tomorrow I'm going to drive a seven-seater. That's also possible, right? So driver and cab are two entities whose attributes are kind of linked with each other with a one-to-one or one-to-many mapping, right? A particular car can be driven by multiple drivers. One can drive the car in the morning and one can drive the car in the evening. So that's also possible. So you need to keep it as a one-to-one or a one-to-many relationship. But for every rider, there can be multiple trips, right? So what I mean by a trip is the map and geography. So we said geography, but it's not necessarily the geography that's the entity in our platform, but it's the trip, right? When I choose it and when I take it and when I go forward. Now, there are other things like location and map grid, which are feeders in, which are non-functional parts, but they're essential parameters that are required for this whole entity, whole ecosystem to function. Essentially, the map grid, the location, and the payment, right? The actual user flow can happen even without payment. For instance, when Uber, there was an emergency situation. I don't know when. Sometime there was a uh, uh, event in Paris. I think there was a huge terrorist event that happened somewhere in France, and Uber declared that they are going to ferry people out of that location. So anybody who has Uber app, they could download if they don't have, book book out of that place without any questions asked. So they added that feature within no time and then made it available for that span of time so that people could flee that particular epicenter quickly, right? So they did it free of cost. So then the payment feature was disabled, right? And the logging in feature was disabled. Directly the map opened up. They just said from here to here, cab came, they ran, right? So it's not necessary, but the three things on the right side of the display is actually entities which are needed for the functioning of the app, but they're not necessarily entities when it comes to the actual user flow or the workflow, right? So this is how we go about and structure. So any question at this point? Are you clear about what I mean by entity and attributes? How do we identify for your projects? And do you think that you will be able to put it up for your projects? For instance, Sunil or Sai Akash, when we were talking about your projects, right? Sunil was talking about a mask. So what is the important entities? Again, you need to be able to identify in that. right? So is it oxygen level, or is it the humidity level, or is it battery levels? All of these, are they really entities, or are they attributes that you want? So that's something that really you need to determine before you start, and that can be determined only when you have done your empathy part, right? You can sit and assume and fill out something now, but from this stage on, if your data points are not correct from your empathy and design thinking, and your features are not identified through that, all of these will be meaningless, right? So spend some time towards that. Okay. So now we have kind of come to a stage where you started to model the data in this form. So for this, you can use certain tools to do it. And what I would kind of recommend to begin with is a piece of pen and paper, right? A pen and a piece of paper would be more than enough to get started, and then translate it to an Excel sheet, and eventually go to a very simple tool that I kind of say there is something called as draw.io. It's a flowchart maker, and it's something like that. So I was just trying to do it for somebody. So essentially, if you go, this is a free platform, right? It's open source and free. So you go here, just open up a sheet, and then you can write down. So here you have UML. So what we were kind of doing it was UML. So UML is essentially what's it called? Unified modeling language, right? So universal or unified modeling language, I think. So that's something that you can pull here and say what's the component, what's its attribute type, and things like that. You can just start putting these things down. We can say it's like this. So you can do that, and once you're done with it, then you can kind of start mapping the flow from point A to maybe from here to here. I'd like to take something, and I'm just showing things. So this is how you kind of go and start making your products to look in a certain way, right? And this is for how you start mapping your attributes. In some projects and some cases, the people tend to do the other way. That is, people tend to first do the wireframes and then come to the data sets. But I highly recommend that you first have identified the data relation and the entities and the attributes, and then go to the final stage of designing your UI, right? So start wireframing only after, not so much in detail, but at least to a stage where you are kind of clear. In fact, my steps that I recommend is design thinking, identify the benefits, identify the features. Once you identify the features, then identify the entities. Once you identify the entities, identify attributes for each entity. Once the attributes are identified, then you do what you call as user flow, right? And then only step into wireframing and UI design. So is this visible? We have a user flow for a simple Uber app functionality. Can somebody, not somebody, can everybody look at this in detail, right? What are the steps that the user would take to achieve the end result, to get a certain value proposition? And remember, user flow should be written for each value proposition or each feature. If it is not each feature, at least for each individual benefit. That is, for each value proposition, which might be a combination of 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 features, should come together as one user flow. If there is a completely different user flow that is happening on this product, then you draw a separate user flow diagram. For instance, Uber for a certain period of time was also delivering food, right? I don't know if you people know. Uber cars were also trying to deliver food. So there was a Uber Eats that was available. Now they have kind of separated that as a separate entity, and then maybe I think they are not doing that anymore in India. But then initially, an empty cab could be booked for you to get food, right? So that user flow, I would want to keep it separately because there's no rider in the first place, and there is no driver. I mean, there is no, the user itself is different there. The user is sitting somewhere at home, and they are not doing their location from there. So they are actually the right from the beginning. The picking up of the location itself is different. It works more like a Zomato or a Swiggy. So there are some very critical changes in the user flow that you might want to take. So because you might have to add parameters like what is the weight of the substance that you're transporting, whether it is hazardous, and then whether payment is required at the hotel where they go and pick up the food for you, or are you going to make the payment upfront? All of these things will be asked, and that will be a different user flow. Do you understand here? So people at this point, I'd like to stop my thing for a minute and open up for questions, because I think too much information overload happened in the last 20 to 30 minutes. So I would like to kind of hit the brakes and get your opinion or feedback at this point on if there is anything that you want to understand better, or if you want to add something here, please go ahead and do so. Are you there, everybody? Hello, hello. Any questions? I had a question. Do people have a dynamic? What do you mean by that, Sayaka? What do you mean by a dynamic data model? I'd like to understand the context from which I'm trying to ask that question.
Hello, sir. Am I audible?
Yeah, you are.
Yeah, like we had a set of features, right? With low priority, then medium, then high. Like if some features require certain sets of data, so in a way, this data will also be kind of
No,
out
no, no,
priority, right?
no. You've got it wrong. That's why I was trying to mention very clearly that you go out with, these are the major entities, right? So this is already final. That's why the list is so big. But you don't make the, thanks actually. So I kind of missed out that point here. You don't make such a big list. You go here, go back to this slide, and you go to a particular feature, right? For example, build itinerary, right? And then for that, you write down the data sets required, attributes required, right? For every entity. And then for the next one, you write separately. For the next one, again, you write separately for all the entities. And then you combine them, right? When you say, I'm going to build a particular feature, only what is needed, you combine and start using it. And as you start building, to which class, what attribute you should add, you can continue to add. You don't have to do it upfront. So it is dynamic, as you asked, but then you don't build your product or solution keeping the the dynamic nature of the data model. You first freeze it for a particular flow, right? For a simple flow. So how do we start? So we started with Uber, and this is what we put out. This is almost the final Uber app, right? I'm not going to do it that way. I'm going to say the feature of registration alone, right? So I'm going to just define the user class or the rider class, and then I'm going to say to have them register what are the attributes that I need. I just list down that name and their address or whatever information you want, and that's it, right? And I leave it at that, and then I then will tell them to log in, right? Now pick up and drop location. Okay, now next is that I want them to go from place A to place B. That is one of my important feature, right? So in that feature I need to pick up their location. So should I put it in the user class or should I do a new class, right? That's what you will start thinking. Why it should then be a new class according to me, because the location is not always constant to the user, right? So you open a class called as location, and that will be called by the user at that instance, and then so on and so forth. So these data sets or whatnot, these attributes will be continuously added, right? So do people have a dynamic data model? The answer is yes, but when you're designing the feature, you first freeze it and finish that flow. And then you modify that flow again and again and again, and until you arrive at the final user flow. So to reach at this slide, you would need a couple of days or so to kind of map it out. But right now it can be assumed and built out. But actually, when you're going out and building it, it'll take some time, because you're writing the user flow with the context of data relation in mind, with the context of what attributes to what entities and how they're going to talk to each other in mind. So this again, I'm talking a little technical here also, because you will have to translate this to your teams. So if say you are an entrepreneur who building a product, you can't go and just say I want a Uber like app and please build it, right? That's not uh, effective enough. So you need to think through these in whatever crude form. This is the crude form that I see effective. Maybe you can pick up a few from this and not pick up a few from this, and then do it. If you are a developer, developers are equipped enough to build this by themselves. Then if you can just give the user story in one sentence, or just this map user flow in one small diagram, and if they are able to do it, then nothing like it. If they're not, then you will have to guide them with these parameters also, right? So I don't know if I was able to answer your question correctly, but
Yes, yes, I understood now.
yeah, clear, right? So yeah, so great. So now any other questions, people?
Hello, sir.
Yes, please tell me.
So can I share the table that I have done?
uh Sunil, is Sunil who's speaking?
A table that yesterday I have done. Can you share that? Like
No,
I
no. Today I'm not. Today we're not doing that. We're doing that tomorrow, because today we have still a couple of other concepts to share. If you have completed that, it's great. If we have time at the end of the session today, we will do it. But maybe after 20 minutes or so, we can do the thing, because I still have a couple of concepts to cover. Right. So tomorrow is when you bring all of these together as a presentation and discussion, right? Starting from the feature model Excel sheet right up to the wireframe. So we've not even started wireframe, so I'm going to jump into that right now, and then we will have your projects to be showcased. You can do that tomorrow. Right. So this is the user flow that we were speaking about. So now after we do this, I would then start the process of wireframing. So what do you mean by wireframes? So now, wireframes are essentially, first we start, these are called low fidelity wireframes. these are the visual representation of how your solution is going to be presented to the end user and how their journey of reaching the end goal or reaching the value proposition from the point they are in gets showcased, right? So the whole purpose of this kind of exercise over the last 2 days was to reach this point, right? We could very easily have reached this point at the beginning itself, right? I mean, we could have started it yesterday itself when we said travel app. You can imagine, okay, there has to be a map, there has to be this, there has to be that. But there are so many elements that would get missed out, either from a design standpoint or from a feature standpoint itself. So at this stage, now, once you have a user flow defined, you go and pick up one of the user flows, right? So what is the user flow we pick up? First is the user, and they have to log in, right? They have to log in and then they have to start, right? So how do we do that? So that's something that we have done. So we have assumed that the first part, that the user is registered and created their ID or created their profile onto the system is done. I am going through the primary workflow of the product itself, right? So you have a login and then you start the process. So what we are saying here is enter the pickup location and allow GPS to locate the user. This is what we're trying to do. So now what we do is we go and we then decide what's the most important thing in our thing, right? For instance, Google thought through uh, Google, let me just stop for a second and tell something about UI, right? UI and UX. What is user experience? What is user interface? User interface is the way through which the end user interacts with the product or solution in order to reach the ultimate benefit, right? Or reach the ultimate value proposition. So here what you do is first make it as foolproof as possible for them to get through this process. Now, as you're aware, Google is a very, very complicated search engine. Their algorithms are highly complicated on how it works, right? It's one of the most sophisticated page rank algorithms and AI algorithms that they have written over the years and done it. But their UI and their UX is predominantly this, right? Can you see this? So what is this? What is this popping up here? It's been 6 months since your last account visit. Oh, very good. Okay. Oh, thanks. Okay. So here it is. Google.com looks like this. Now, does it anything talk about the algorithm they're using or the way they're structuring things? Nothing. They are very clearly going and showcasing the value proposition up front, right? So this is what we call as ultimate UI and UX design, right? The center of the page talks about the ultimate value proposition that is on offer. That is, go and search whatever the hell you want and I'll give you answers. And it's done, right? So the UI and UX is done, right? So that's the power of
So you're on mute.
That's the power of UI and UX development. And here we need to keep that in mind before we actually get uh, started with our process, right? So now where is my slide? So where here again, what is the most important feature that we have in what we call as wireframing is identify the user flow and then go back to the screen that we want to develop. So take a piece of paper, put it out as a simple diagram. And the most important thing that Uber says is that where you are right now and where do you want to go, right? So this is how the user journey happens. The user journey that we mentioned here translates to this, right? What is that? So one is, you have a map, and then you have the option of searching your current location, or you have the option of setting your GPS to pick up your current location. So you do that, and then you say, I want to go to a certain destination, right? So first you pick your destination, your location, then you choose your destination. Again, there are certain, recommendations that come up saying, you do want to go here or there in that pinpointed location. If not, you actually enter that. Once you do that, then it says you have your rides that are available, the journey options, which car do you want, and everything, and then the price, which is very important. Before, it's a paid option, right? So you go and get 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 your ride that you want for the price that you want to pay. You agree to that, and then the journey is confirmed. Then the driver actually gets the information, and then the journey is accepted. So this is the first phase. Right here, it's still at a very high level. Do you see that this is a very high level wireframe and very low fidelity? This is something that we have to create first before we jump into this. So at this point, do you have any questions, people? You can ask me, or is this clear?
It's clear, sir.
Okay, great. So now after this, we can kind of go and use a draw.io or any of these to actually translate it into a much more stronger UI wireframe, and then take it forward. So how that can be done is, let me just share another screen. Just give me a second. Are you able to see the screen? So here, I just pulled out a small thing that I was referring before starting this session. Somebody has gone out and redesigned the Uber wireframe, but then, it's something that you can also do, right, for your projects. So essentially how they have gone about is every screen, every step. So did you notice like one feature they have taken and drawn this, and this is very crudely done on a piece of paper. I strongly recommend that you do this for your projects as a wireframe, because doing this, you will get a clear understanding of what is missed out, right? A lot of people might think that this is an unnecessary step, but it might be very much required. For instance, I'll directly jump into some discovery that, people will make during the process, right? For instance, if, sure if this has it. So for instance, in this journey, something that you can identify is if you are on the way, for example, right? You're on the way and the trip has already started. And suddenly you realize that you don't want to go where you're going, and you want to go to some other place because your friend said that, the destination is changed. So here, choose destination is there, the trip has started and all of that. So when the trip has started, still you might have the option of change destination, right? So now that is not shown here, but then you might need to bring that feature in. So once you have done this, you have to now take it to people. So what I mean by prototype in the design thinking process, or what I mean by testing in the design thinking process, is this. This is your prototype. Please remember that your prototype need not necessarily be a final product or a solution. Your prototype is something that very clearly demonstrates the value proposition that you're offering, right? Do you people agree that this is a prototype that can be taken to end users, and then your empathy process can be further refined through this, right? Where your ideation process can be further refined by taking it to the market, right? So if I do this, then somebody will point out saying that, okay, I'm here, I'm going on the way, and suddenly I forgot something at home. So what do I do? Right? So what do I do? So then I go about saying that, uh, I will say change destination option is available. So change destination will mean what? If I change the destination, it also goes out to say that the pricing will change. So there has to be a pop for that. And then you have to accept that price. And only then you can go forward to finish that thing. So this is a new feature. Remember, this is not the primary feature, but this is a new feature that you add. So you draw user flow for that particular feature, and then combine these two as an app or a solution, and only then refine your UI UX. So yesterday somebody was asking, that yesterday or maybe in the previous class, that don't you think it's the job of the UX designer to do all of this, right? It is not necessarily the job of the UX designer to do this, but this part should be done by the core team who wants to give the value proposition to the end customer. If you're able to do this much, then the UX designer will take it and then say, okay, let me move this here, let me make this simpler. This is a redundant thing, so let me add that, let me make it aesthetically pleasing. All of that can be done only if the true core value proposition is clearly communicated to the UX designer. So this could be also our input to somebody who's doing a UI UX design. Not so detailed, but something like this is good enough. If not this, at least you need to go up and pinpoint, this much to them, right? So here, I'm not sure if the change destination feature is added here. So then the user flow at the back end is also mentioned here. There are two parallel processes. As soon as a trip is booked, a driver is also notified with the nearest vehicles, nearest, you riders, and they accept a certain ride request, and then that information travels across here to the app, and the whole process happens, and then the ride actually happens. So this is broadly the structure of how you go about doing the UI UX design. So yes, I think with this, I've kind of arrived at a stage where I've kind of put in all the points required for a wireframing required for your product. So now maybe you can come out and ask me if there are any specific questions related to your project or something. So what I'm looking at from you for tomorrow's session is that, I would want you to actually go out and put out your user journeys in this format and uh, in this format. And then if you can put out wireframes of your basic product, you will be more than surprised to see that, so many attributes, so many functions which you did not think about before can be added. Even for people who are doing a hardware based product, I think Sunil was there and some people, this will become very important, right? Not in terms of an app, there the user journey will be more of a product flow, right? So you can then, if you're doing a hardware app especially, you go in here and say product data flow, right? So here you say I have a humidity sensor and I'm picking up the data of a humidity sensor, and then how this data is saved in which file and where all this data point is used. That's what you should start thinking from your product standpoint, right? Not how the people are going to use the app, but how the data actually flows within the app itself or within the product itself to get the output. So this is something that you might have to do in hardware products, and then go map it to your user experience. Like, do I need a button to start the device, or do I need a Bluetooth interface, or do I need a sensor driven trigger point? All of these can be different attributes or different features that you can add, and then decide whether it's high priority or low priority, and then design the product. For instance, when an Apple phone came, there was a button right at the center of the phone, but now they've eliminated that because they feel there is no need for that, right? So that's how they design hardware systems. And then before, when we used to have laptops, there used to be a on and off switch, like a very mechanical switch, but now it's a software driven on and off, right? When you press the power button, it's just a software that kicks in and shuts down the system, right? And the system goes on to deep sleep. So these are small little changes that they've started to make on the hardware. So these are all user flows and what you call as user journeys that they would have defined to make it happen. For instance, if you just close the flap of a laptop, it just goes to sleep. Before, there was no option like that, right? So if you had left your laptop like that and not shut it down, it would drain out battery and stop working, right? So this is how you kind of evolve on your product's core features and functionalities. So any questions, people, at this point? I think we've kind of moved quickly on this session, mainly because, in my previous session, I think by the time I reached this point, we were already out of time, and we were almost at 8:15 day before yesterday, mainly because I think we had a lot of people asking many questions. So I would like to allow this forum also to post some questions. It could be related to this specifically or something related to your project also, so that I can now then do a deep dive with your project tomorrow. Maybe we'll get quality time to discuss about it. So any questions at this point, people? Or if you wish to share your Excel sheets, maybe you can do that now. I think Sunil wanted to share. I'm not sure if he's still part of the session, but if you want to share the Excel sheet of your product or feature that you worked on yesterday, maybe now we can look at it so that we can translate that to tomorrow's wireframe and user flow diagrams. Were you able to work on it yesterday, people?
Hello, sir.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wasn't able to complete the Excel sheet, but I tried to get my doubts cleared, which I got while trying to do it. I
Okay.
think I will be able to do it in a week or so after some user interviews and stuff.
Okay. But then I would say for tomorrow, if if you could just put out a small little wireframe or a simple, user flow or diagram, that would be helpful to kind of work through that in a more detailed manner, right? So that would be something good. Yes, anybody? Yeah, anybody else who have questions? It could also be related to your projects that you're doing, not necessarily only wireframes or user flow also, right? If you wish to ask a few questions, you can do that either today or tomorrow also. I'm welcome to answer that. Not an issue. Anybody has any questions specific to your projects or specific to user flow or wireframing, you can ask me right away. Are you people part of the cohort in terms of, have identified any projects, or you're still in the stage of identifying what project to do for the cohort? What stage are you in? I'm not very sure.
So my team was selected for like the recently released list of teams.
Okay, but what is the project idea that you're working on?
Yes, sir. So the basic problem was that while trying to study online, like learn something online, the number of resources is too huge, and it's difficult to find the right resource for you, for a student like me to study something. So the idea was to have a platform where it will be easier to find such resources, which are like find good recommendations for whatever you want to study.
Okay, understood. Interesting. Okay, but how would you achieve that? What is your thought process on that?
Sir, so like what I feel is like in what people generally do is they ask someone who's already done it. Like for in college, people ask their seniors, or people see on Twitter if someone shares a good resource, someone credible shares a good resource, they try to go through that. So what I
I'm
want to
asking, how
do
are you going to fetch that information?
is a crowdsource. It's a crowdsourcing.
Okay, so the users will come out and throw out recommendations, right? That's what it is.
Yeah. The aim is to make it as easy as possible since.
Interesting. Okay. So yeah, I mean, just think through like what would make somebody offer a suggestion or a recommendation on your platform, right? So that would be something that you can start with, and then we can kind of work around it. All right. So anybody else has any questions? I think we have a limited participation today. So there's a few people who are there. So if you wish to ask me any questions, you can do so. Otherwise, maybe we can move the workshop to tomorrow in terms of, if you can come prepared with a user flow diagram or a flowchart diagram along with, what you call as uh, questions on your project. We'd be more than happy to guide you and work through. So, Akhil, I think we've kind of covered all the topics for today, and since the participation, there are not many people, the questions is limited. So my thought process was that if they can walk through this and tomorrow we can have a deep dive on their projects as a one-to-one, I can do that. So this one-to-one also can be, as I mentioned, not only about user flow or workflow, but also about your projects, or if you have any entrepreneurial thoughts or things like that. We can do that also before.
Yeah, sure, Arvind. Yeah. So tomorrow same time we can set up the same call, and meanwhile I will try to connect with all the participants individually to come up with a proper plan. Then it is easy for us to interact with all of them.
Sure.
Yeah.
Right. We can do
Definitely.
that. I mean, like, see, just I need about a couple of things from them. One is the user flow of their product, and the wireframe, if they can bring it through, then there will be a good feedback session specifically on this topic. But even otherwise, if they have additional questions regarding their projects or regarding their business models, we can also kind of bring that in the workshop tomorrow.
Yeah. So then I will inform them. We are expecting the complete user flow of your product as well as the wireframing, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
just as a simple structure, not necessarily.
Sure. Yeah. I will note it down. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sure, Arvind. I will note it down.
Sure. Any other questions, people? Do you have any other questions? Otherwise, we could, not hold you back. We can, move the session to tomorrow and take it forward.
So nothing as of now, sir. Thank you for the session.
Okay, thank you. All right. So can we end the session now, Akhil?
Yes, Arvind. Yeah, we can end the session. Yeah. Thank you, everyone. See you tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thank you.